Born to break limits, limits are not laws of nature, they are assumptions, temporary conclusions drawn by people who stopped trying too soon. What most call impossible is usually just untested. The ceiling you think exists is nothing more than the last point where someone else decided to quit. We are not here to inherit boundaries, we are here to destroy them. Born to break limits means refusing to let the status quo dictate what is possible. It means looking at barriers not as stop signs, but as puzzles waiting to be solved. Every breakthrough in history was once declared unrealistic. Electricity, flight, space travel, digital network. Each was dismissed by experts, ridiculed by the comfortable, resisted by the establishment. And yet each became reality because someone decided that limits were not sacred. They treated the word impossible as fuel. Breaking limits is not about arrogance, it's about evolution. Human progress depends on those willing to test the edges, to push until the boundary cracks. That's how rockets land, that's how cars run on clean energy, that's how entire industries shift. The ones who settle reinforce the cage. The ones who challenge it expand the horizon for everyone. But here's the truth. Breaking limits is painful. It's not clean, it's not pretty, it's not comfortable. It's hundreds of failures, it's ridicule, doubt, exhaustion. It's people telling you to stop wasting your time. The only way through is obsession. The only way forward is resilience. Limits don't fall to talent, they fall to relentless persistence. Born to break limits means accepting that resistance is proof you're on the right path. It means you don't measure progress by applause, but by the walls you've cracked, the doors you've forced open, the futures you've made possible. If you want to change the world, you can't negotiate with limits. You confront them, you break them, and when they fall, the definition of possible changes forever. Limits are assumptions, not laws of nature. Every breakthrough begins where someone refused to quit. Resistance is proof you're on the right path. Limits don't fall to talent, but to relentless persistence. Limits are assumptions, not laws of nature. When most people look at the world, they see boundaries and take them as permanent. They assume that if something hasn't been done before, it must be impossible. This way of thinking creates a mental cage where possibility is confused with precedent. But the truth is that what we call limits are nothing more than human guesses, temporary markers, conclusions made under specific conditions, often outdated the moment someone dares to challenge them. Gravity exists, physics exists, thermodynamics exists. But the interpretations of what we can or cannot do within them have shifted over and over again. The edge of what's possible has always been a moving target, never fixed, never final. Consider history. At one time, people assumed humans couldn't fly. It wasn't that the laws of physics forbade flight. It was that the human imagination hadn't engineered a solution yet. The Wright brothers didn't rewrite gravity. They worked with it differently. The limit was an assumption until someone exposed it as one. The same story repeated with electricity, with communication across oceans, with computers small enough to fit in pockets, with spacecraft leaving Earth. Each limit turned out to be nothing more than the last conclusion reached by people who stopped trying. Limits endure because people confuse difficulty with impossibility. If something is hard, expensive, risky, or beyond current tools, it gets labeled as impossible. But that label is not a scientific truth. It is a psychological defense mechanism. It protects people from confronting their own fear of failure, their own unwillingness to endure discomfort, their own lack of imagination. When someone says, "That can't be done," what they usually mean is, "I don't know how to do it, and I'm not willing to try long enough to find out." The limit exists only because effort ended. To understand limits as assumptions is to see them as challenges, not verdicts. If you treat them as laws, you accept them without question. If you treat them as assumptions, you interrogate them, you run experiments, you test the edges, you find cracks. Every genuine innovation has come from that attitude. Curiosity plus stubbornness equals breakthroughs. People who refuse to be intimidated by limits inevitably discover that many of them crumble under persistent pressure. This mindset also changes how you interpret failure. If limits were absolute, every failure would be final, but if limits are assumptions, every failure is just new data. The plane didn't fly this way, so try again differently. The rocket didn't land on this attempt, so refine the model. The energy source doesn't scale yet, so adjust the design. Each setback isn't proof of impossibility, it's proof that the current assumption about how to succeed was incomplete. The more you test, the more assumptions you dismantle. Eventually, the so-called limit reveals itself as an unlocked door hidden behind a series of wrong keys. Another reason limits persist is social reinforcement. Entire systems are built on the idea that certain things cannot or should not be done. Experts, industries, and institutions often defend limits because they stabilize the existing order. If everyone believed new possibilities were just around the corner, entire hierarchies would collapse. So limits are spoken of as if they are sacred. They are guarded not only by doubt but by authority. The resilient builder sees through this. They know that impossible is often shorthand for disruptive. They understand that limits are sometimes maintained not by nature but by vested interest. To break them requires not only technical innovation but cultural defiance. Limits also shrink or expand depending on perspective. At the level of the individual, a limit might be a lack of skill, knowledge, or resources. At the level of society, it might be infrastructure or regulation. At the level of physics, it might be energy or material constraints. But in every case, the boundary is not fixed. Skills can be learned, knowledge can be expanded, resources can be developed, regulations can be challenged, energy can be harnessed in new forms. Limits are flexible. They bend to pressure, and sometimes they snap. Seeing them as assumptions means treating them as dynamic, not permanent. Breaking limits begins with language. The words we use to describe possibility shape the way we attempt it. If a team constantly hears "we can't," they stop trying. If instead they hear "we haven't yet," the energy shifts. That small change reframes the limit as temporary. It opens space for creativity, experimentation, persistence. It acknowledges the truth. What seems impossible today may be inevitable tomorrow. The language of assumption keeps the door open. The language of finality closes it before the attempt is even made. This understanding also reframes ambition. If limits are assumptions, then ambition is not arrogance. It is exploration. To aim high is not to defy reality but to question it. To reach for what others dismiss is not delusion but research. Ambition, in this sense, becomes the practical act of testing assumptions at scale. Every ambitious project is a laboratory where the supposed limits of the world are interrogated. Sometimes the results confirm boundaries, often they redraw them. Always they expand human knowledge. The deeper truth is that human beings themselves are built to break assumption. Our entire evolution has been defined by testing the edges of what seemed possible. The first tools, the first fire, the first language, the first civilization, all were leaps past the assumed limits of the time. To be human is to push against boundaries. It is our defining characteristic. When we forget this, when we settle into comfort, we shrink. When we remember it, when we challenge, when we build, we expand not only our external reality, but also our internal capacity. Treating limits as assumptions also requires courage. Doubt is cheap, criticism is easy, skepticism is everywhere. To stand in the face of that and say, maybe they're wrong, takes boldness. Courage does not eliminate fear, it simply chooses not to obey it. Every person who has ever broken a so-called limit carried fear with them, but they carried persistence alongside it. They stepped forward when others stepped back. They tried one more time when others stopped. Courage is the force that turns assumptions into experiments. The paradox is that once a limit is broken, it looks obvious in hindsight. Flight seems inevitable now. Space travel seems natural. Digital communication feels normal. But before they were achieved, they were ridiculed. That is the cycle of limits. First they are declared impossible, then they are mocked, then they are resisted, and finally they are accepted as obvious. This cycle proves over and over again that limits are temporary illusions. What feels impossible now is often just waiting for the right combination of persistence, creativity, and courage. Every breakthrough begins where someone refused to quit. The pattern repeats across history. The decisive moment was never the first spark of talent, nor the initial wave of excitement, but the point where everything seemed lost and someone chose to continue anyway. That is the hidden birthplace of transformation. Not in the early optimism, not in the polished speeches or bold predictions, but in the long dark hours when momentum stalled and everyone else walked away. Progress is not born from comfort, it is born from refusal. Breakthroughs do not appear instantly. They grow out of cycles of trial and error, each cycle demanding more endurance than the last. The Wright brothers didn't make aviation history because they were the first to dream of flying. Many had dreamed before them. They made history because they refused to quit when wings splintered, when prototypes failed, when ridicule mounted. Edison didn't find the light bulb on his first attempt. Thousands of failed experiments preceded it, each one a chance to quit, each one resisted. The difference was not genius but grit, the willingness to continue through frustration and ridicule until the solution revealed itself. Quitting is always easiest when the weight is heaviest. That is the precise moment where breakthroughs are either born or buried. In that space, talent alone cannot carry you, inspiration cannot sustain you. Only raw resilience keeps the work alive. To refuse to quit is not a single decision made once, but 1,000 decisions made daily. To show up again, to adjust, to test, to push, to endure. It is choosing persistence even when your own belief flickers. Refusing to quit transforms failure into data. Each collapse becomes a lesson rather than an ending. This mindset is the foundation of breakthroughs. When most people stop at a wall, they declare it final. The few who refuse to quit see the wall as feedback, as a problem to be studied, as material to be dismantled piece by piece. That difference in perception is what converts dead ends into doorways. Every failure is either a grave or a laboratory. The choice lies in whether you continue. This refusal also creates compounding progress. Each attempt builds on the last, even if invisible at first. 100 small adjustments accumulate until one day the system tips. To outsiders, the breakthrough looks sudden, but from within, it is simply the latest in a long chain of persistence. The rocket lands after countless crashes. The engine runs clean after endless redesigns. The cure works after years of failed trials. What looks like a miracle is nothing more than the visible result of relentless continuation. The refusal to quit is not blind stubbornness. It is adaptive persistence. It does not mean repeating the same mistake endlessly. It means refusing to abandon the mission while continuously adjusting the method. Quitting ends the story, continuing rewrites it. The path to breakthrough is rarely straight, it is a winding maze. Those who refuse to quit navigate turn after turn until the exit appears. Those who quit early are left with unfinished maps. Every major leap forward has faced overwhelming resistance, not just from the problem itself, but from society. Doubters, critics, experts, institutions, many voices declare the effort a waste, the vision unrealistic, the timeline absurd. These voices grow loudest when success is farthest away. To refuse to quit in the face of external doubt requires a conviction that runs deeper than public approval. It demands the ability to keep building even when recognition is absent, to keep moving when validation is nowhere in sight. The true birthplace of breakthroughs lies in obscurity, not applause. Refusal is also contagious. In teams, it becomes culture. One person's decision to keep going inspires another, and persistence compounds across the group. Teams that refuse to quit create breakthroughs faster than individuals because their collective resilience multiplies. Where one person may fall, another carries the weight. Where doubt creeps in, shared conviction reinforces strength. The environment itself becomes a force field against quitting. That is why the greatest innovations often emerge not from isolated talent, but from groups united by stubborn endurance. There is also a psychological transformation that happens when you refuse to quit. At first, every failure feels personal, every obstacle heavy, every setback like proof of inadequacy. But over time, something shifts. You stop fearing failure because you've survived it so many times. You stop expecting ease because you've accepted struggle as normal. This mental toughness becomes your advantage. What once broke you now barely shakes you. That adaptation is what allows you to continue far beyond the point where most people stop. Breakthroughs demand this depth of resilience because the problems worth solving are not small. Easy problems do not change the world. The real frontiers, clean energy, interplanetary travel, artificial intelligence, medical revolutions, are defined by layers of complexity that resist quick fixes. They demand thousands of hours of work, endless iterations, a stamina measured in decades. Without the refusal to quit, these battles cannot be won. Without the long endurance, the breakthrough never comes. This mindset also reframes success. If every attempt is simply part of a larger process, then temporary failure is not discouraging, it is expected. Each failed launch, each broken prototype, each collapsed deal is not proof of defeat, but proof of progress. By refusing to quit, you shift the definition of success from immediate outcome to continued action. Success becomes the ability to stay in the fight long enough for the world to catch up to your persistence. The refusal to quit is not dramatic. It is quiet, relentless, often invisible. It happens in the late nights when no one is watching, in the private doubts you silence, in the repeated attempts that no one else will ever hear about. It does not announce itself loudly, but its impact is enormous. Every visible breakthrough is built on an invisible mountain of persistence. Every overnight success is the public face of years of refusal. When you look closely at those who achieved the extraordinary, you see the same story, not the absence of failure, but the absence of surrender. They did not arrive because they were destined, but because they kept walking when the road ended. They kept digging when the ground was unyielding. They kept trying when logic suggested quitting. That refusal is the birthplace of every major leap forward humanity has ever known. Resistance is proof you're on the right path. Every attempt to do something meaningful attracts friction, not because the universe is against you, but because the very nature of change provokes pushback. Resistance is the signal that you are pressing against the edge of what exists, that you are trying to bend reality into a shape it has not yet taken. If there were no resistance, it would mean you were moving within the boundaries of what is already known, already accepted, already comfortable. The absence of resistance is the surest sign you are staying inside the cage of mediocrity. When you push into new territory, resistance shows up in multiple forms. It comes from the physical challenge of solving a problem that has never been solved. It comes from the social challenge of skeptics, critics, and so-called experts insisting you are wasting your time. It comes from the internal challenge of doubt, fear, and exhaustion pressing you to stop. These layers of resistance pile up not to end your effort, but to test its depth. Every layer asks you the same question: how much does this matter to you? If the answer is shallow, you will stop. If the answer is obsession, you will continue. Think of any breakthrough in history. The development of electricity was resisted by those who thought it was dangerous and unnecessary. The first automobiles were ridiculed as noisy, impractical toys. The idea of humans traveling to space was once dismissed as fantasy, Every single one of these advances faced resistance because they disrupted comfort, tradition, or power structures. Yet that very resistance was the indicator that the work mattered, that it was aimed at something transformative. Nobody resists the ordinary. Nobody fights to preserve the unremarkable. Resistance arises only where there is a real threat to the status quo. Resistance is also a teacher. It reveals weaknesses in your approach, exposes flaws in your design, challenges assumptions you didn't realize you held. When you encounter resistance and adapt to it, you grow stronger, your work becomes sharper, your resolve deepens. The first design breaks, so you strengthen the next. The critics laugh, so you refine your explanation. The obstacle halts you, so you invent a new method to get around it. Resistance forces evolution. Without it, your effort would remain crude, untested, fragile. Resistance is the sharpening stone against which ambition is honed. There is also a psychological paradox. Most people interpret resistance as a warning to stop, but those who achieve breakthroughs reinterpret it as confirmation to continue. When a project feels impossible, when every door slams shut, when progress stalls, that moment feels unbearable. Yet that is exactly where growth begins. If it were easy, the breakthrough would already exist. The fact that it resists you is proof that it is valuable, that it is rare, that it is worth pursuing. The harder the resistance, the more significant the potential transformation. Resistance from others is often rooted in fear. People fear change, fear losing relevance, fear seeing their world. You disrupt it. They project that fear as criticism. It will never work. It's too risky. You should quit while you're ahead. But hidden inside those words is validation. If your idea didn't matter, nobody would waste time opposing it. If your work weren't powerful, nobody would bother doubting it. Opposition is backhanded proof of significance. Every laugh, every dismissal, every attempt to undermine you is evidence that you are building something strong enough to disturb the comfortable. Internal resistance is often the most brutal. Doubt whispers louder than critics. Fear grows heavier than any obstacle outside. Your own mind tries to conserve energy, protect pride, avoid failure. It tells you to stop, to retreat, to settle. That inner resistance is not a sign you are weak, but a sign you are stretching beyond your current capacity. Muscles resist before they grow stronger. Minds resist before they expand. The presence of that inner conflict is the proof that you are crossing into new territory where growth is inevitable. Resistance also reveals commitment. Anyone can dream, anyone can start, but resistance filters the casual from the committed. When the friction arrives, and it always does, most people turn back. The few who continue prove not only to others but to themselves that they are serious. Resistance forces a choice: abandon the pursuit or elevate the effort. Those who elevate are the ones who eventually carve new paths for humanity. It is tempting to imagine a life without resistance, a clear path where everything flows smoothly, but that life produces no innovation, no discovery, no evolution. Resistance is not the enemy. It is the price of significance. To create something lasting, to redefine boundaries, to build what does not yet exist, you must accept resistance as constant. The friction you feel is not a wall, but a compass. It points you toward the places where impact is possible. It tells you where the fight is worth engaging. When rockets exploded on launch pads, when electric cars were dismissed as fantasies, when attempts at radical new technologies failed repeatedly, resistance was everywhere. Yet each failure, each criticism, each delay confirmed that the pursuit mattered. If it were trivial, nobody would care. If it were meaningless, nobody would resist. The path of least resistance leads to irrelevance. The path of greatest resistance leads to breakthroughs that redefine entire industries and futures. Resistance strips away illusion. It makes you confront the truth about your vision. Do you want it only when it is easy, or do you want it enough to fight for it? That is the question resistance always asks, and each time you answer with persistence, each time you continue despite the pressure, the resistance loses some of its power. You learn that it cannot stop you. It can only shape you. The more resistance you endure, the more unshakable you become. The presence of resistance means you are alive at the frontier, pushing the edge of what exists toward what could be. It means you are no longer operating in the realm of the ordinary, but in the arena of the extraordinary. Resistance is proof that you are building something that demands energy, demands sacrifice, demands persistence. And though it may break those who are shallow, it strengthens those who refuse to back down. It's don't fall to talent, but to relentless persistence. Talent sparks attention. Talent can accelerate progress in the beginning, but by itself talent is fragile. It cracks under pressure, it stalls at the first wall, it burns out when the applause fades. Persistence, on the other hand, is the force that turns raw ability into actual achievement. It is persistence that bends the arc of failure toward eventual success. Every frontier crossed, every barrier shattered, every revolution achieved came not from the most gifted, but from the most determined. Talent creates potential, but persistence converts potential into reality. A brilliant idea without the stamina to fight through rejection remains an idea. A gifted engineer without the resilience to withstand repeated failure leaves behind abandoned sketches instead of functioning machines. The world is full of talented people who never changed anything because they lacked the endurance to keep going when progress slowed. Talent is a seed. Persistence is the soil, the water, the sunlight. Without persistence, talent cannot grow. History illustrates this truth over and over. Thomas Edison was not the only one experimenting with electricity, but he was the one who tried thousands of variations until he found one that worked. The Wright brothers were not the most educated in aeronautics, but they were the ones who persisted in refining their designs, testing, failing, and testing again until controlled flight was possible. Space exploration was not the result of sheer brilliance alone. It was decades of persistence through crashes, losses, miscalculations, and global doubt. What separated the breakthrough makers from the forgotten names was never raw talent alone, but the relentless refusal to stop. Persistence works because it compounds. Every attempt, even a failed one, adds a layer of knowledge, builds resilience, uncovers patterns that talent alone would never reveal. Each test feeds into the next. Each setback plants a clue. Persistence transforms failure from a verdict into a resource. The person who persists does not experience failure as an ending, but as data to be mined, as scaffolding for the next attempt. The cumulative weight of persistent effort eventually tips the balance, breaking limits that seemed unmovable at first. Talent often collapses under resistance because talent is accustomed to early praise. The talented child is celebrated for instant ability, for natural brilliance, for results achieved with little effort. But when the difficulty increases, when the praise vanishes, when the failures mount, talent alone feels betrayed. It is persistence that carries you through the silence, the doubt, the ridicule. Persistence accepts difficulty as normal, accepts resistance as the cost of progress. Persistence expects failure and plans for endurance beyond it. Limits are designed to filter out the casual. They are not toppled by the lucky or the gifted. They are toppled by those who refuse to leave. To break limits, you must be willing to continue long after talent has given its best performance. The stage where most people quit is the exact stage where persistence becomes the only currency. That is why persistence beats talent, because limits are not designed to yield quickly. They yield only after pressure is applied again and again until the structure weakens and breaks. There is also a cultural obsession with talent that blinds people to the power of persistence. Stories highlight prodigies, geniuses, natural, born leaders, but rarely do they capture the invisible years of persistence behind the visible moment of success. The myth of talent creates excuses. People assume they cannot achieve because they are not naturally gifted, but in truth, the decisive factor is persistence. Geniuses fail if they quit. Average individuals succeed if they persist. Persistence is the great equalizer, the force that erases the gap between natural brilliance and raw determination. The path of persistence is grueling. It requires facing the same wall hundreds of times, approaching it from new angles, enduring the bruises of collision, refusing to stop until the wall finally cracks. It requires absorbing rejection not once but repeatedly, sometimes for years, while maintaining the belief that progress is still possible. Persistence is not glamorous, it is not applause. It is long hours, silent work, invisible effort. But it is this invisible persistence that births visible revolutions. Limits fall not when they are confronted once, but when they are confronted relentlessly. The first attempt is rarely enough, nor the 10th, nor sometimes the 1,000. But persistence does not count the failures, it absorbs them. Persistence is immune to the scoreboard. It cares only about continuing, about pressing forward, about maintaining pressure until the barrier surrenders. Talent may start the race, but persistence finishes it. There is also a hidden strength in persistence. It builds character alongside progress. Every cycle of effort, failure, and continuation ingrains resilience deeper into your identity. Over time, you no longer just do persistent things. You become persistence itself. Your mind rewires to interpret setbacks differently, to see rejection not as humiliation, but as confirmation that you are still in the fight. That psychological transformation is more powerful than talent, because it ensures you cannot be stopped by temporary loss. You become unbreakable in ways talent alone can never achieve. In innovation, persistence is non-negotiable because every meaningful advance is surrounded by layers of difficulty. Solving climate challenges, building sustainable energy systems, expanding humanity beyond Earth, curing diseases, these are not problems that collapse at the touch of talent. They require years of failure, billions of iterations, oceans of doubt. They demand persistence beyond what most people are willing to give. Those who persist through the magnitude of these challenges are the ones who eventually stand where no one else has stood. Persistence also changes perception. To the outsider, breakthroughs appear sudden. The rocket lands, the product succeeds, the vision materializes. But to the one who persisted, the so-called overnight success is simply the result of years of relentless endurance. Without persistence, nothing would be visible. Talent might produce sparks, but persistence builds the fire. Limits may feel immovable, but they are not eternal. They exist only until someone applies enough sustained force to push past them. Talent may start that force, but it is persistence that sustains it until the wall cracks. Every new frontier crossed by humanity, every invention, every cure, every leap into the unknown, was a testament to persistence refusing to accept that limits are permanent.